Hello, everybody. This is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're here with another one of our 5-minute histories. Happy Monday. I think usually in prior videos on Mondays, I'd say something like Happy Monday, and we're heading into our 7th week or whatever week of videos. And to be honest with you, I can't really remember what week this is we're heading into. I do remember that the first few weeks when we did this, I was wearing a sweater, and I am now definitely wearing a short sleeve shirt. So happy Monday, and thanks to all of you who have stuck with us, and thanks especially to all of you who have shared your stories about historic places with us, and to those of you who have contributed, whether it's $5 or $10 or $50. We are a small organization, and your support is making this possible. So thanks again to all of you who have contributed and to all those considering it. All right, let's jump into today's topic, which is Lithuanian Hall. And we're going to go over to the Hollins Roundhouse neighborhood, just south of where the University of Maryland Biopark is, west of Martin Luther King. And I first got to know Lithuanian Hall probably about 20 years ago when I went to an event there called the Night of 100 Elvises. And I suspect a number of you have also been to that. If you haven't, it's absolutely fantastic. What I remember most about the building, actually what I remember most about it is the event is 100 different Elvis impersonator acts, all doing Elvis tunes. My favorite was a group of middle-aged women who had come from Canada, all of course dressed in different Elvis outfits, and they were fabulous. But in addition to that, what I remember most about the building is a wonderful bar on the first floor, one of those rectangular bars with the bartenders in the middle and the glasses hanging from the ceiling. Hadn't been renovated or really changed, probably updated, but not really changed since the 1940s or 50s. And I remember the wonderful rooms, every room different and every room really wonderfully interesting. And let's get to that. But before we get to that, let's talk about how we have Lithuanian immigrants in Baltimore. And we're going to talk about really 3 waves of immigrants. The first starting in the 1860s. In 1861, Lithuania was part of the Russian Empire. And at that time, Russia abolished serfdom. And if you remember from your world history class, serfdom was a lot of things, but one of the things it was is it meant that if you were a serf, a farm worker, you really couldn't leave your farm. So Russia abolishes that, and many of the former serfs were able to move about. Many became migrant laborers, and some, especially after the famine in Russia and Lithuania in the 1860s, I think 1867, some of them started coming to the United States. The Tsar didn't like that, tried to stop them at the border, but a lot of them got through, and luckily a lot of them got through here to Baltimore. So the first wave is in the 1860s, and these folks were, unlike many other immigrants, probably the highest number of them considered the United States a temporary part of their plan. They came here, and upwards of 30 to 50% eventually went back to Lithuania. But again, lucky for us, a lot of them stayed. And they started living and working around the Hollins Roundhouse neighborhood, where Lithuania Hall is, and Pigtown. They worked in the garment industry on Paca and Redwood Streets and Utah and Howard, and they worked at the B&O railroads, and this became a real hub for them. The idea for a hall, a center place, started in the early 1900s as the community had grown to maybe about 15,000 Lithuanians. And before we get to that, I just want to read, and I'm going to read this, a few folks who probably many of us will know today who come from Lithuanian descent. Some noted folks in Hollywood: William Shatner, for you Star Trek fans, Sean Penn, and Moe, Curly, and Shemp Howard, who we know as the Three Stooges. In music, we have Anthony Kiedis, who is the founder of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. In politics, we have Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois, if you remember his rise to stardom. Author J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye, Lithuanian descent, and author Ruta Sepetys, who wrote a book called Between the Shades of Grey, an account of her return to Lithuania. And finally, in sports, we have Dick Butkus, you Chicago Bears fans, as my wife sort of is, Jack Sharkey, the heavyweight champion, Muriel Zagunis, the fencing gold medalist most recently, and a gentleman here in Baltimore who dazzled all of us who were around then in the world with his magical arm, a gentleman named John Unitas. All right, so those folks all trace their ancestry to Lithuania. And in the 1900s, the Lithuanians in Baltimore began to get earnest about building a hall. They first bought some houses on Berry Street around the corner, but by the 19-teens, they had purchased 2 buildings on Hollins Street from a gentleman named Frank Knapp. He had been running a school for the deaf there, and it had gotten so big, up to 80 students, that he was moving out, and the Lithuanians purchased them and started to renovate. But before we get there, incidentally, the buildings date from the time of Thomas Dekay Winans. If you remember from a prior video, he was the Baltimore train engineer. He and his brother went over to Russia at the behest of the Tsar, built the Moscow to St. Peter's Railway. He came back and built a fantastic in-town estate, Alexandrovsky, that's including these 2 buildings, and then his country estate, the Crimea. The land that he bought and the land where these 2 buildings and where Lithuanian Hall is now actually was called the McHenry Estate, named after James McHenry, the aide-de-camp to General Washington. So we've gone from the Revolution to the building of the Moscow-St. Peter's Railroad, and now to this wave of immigrants from Lithuania turning that area into their hub. Lithuanian Hall was a wonderful space. When it opened, it had a month-long celebration showcasing the diversity of what was able to be done there. It had theater, it had plays, it had choirs, it had sporting events inside the building. It also had, in addition to entertainment, it housed the Lithuanian Building and Loan Association to provide loans to folks coming over from Lithuania who had not very much money. And it had the Lithuanian National Library providing books in the Lithuanian language for those folks who needed them. And that did pretty well. The second wave of immigration happened in the 1940s after World War II, when the Soviets had taken over. And this wave of immigrants was fearing for their lives. They were coming here as their friends and family were being sent to Siberia in the forced labor camps that the Soviets were doing. And this group very much wanted to preserve the Lithuanian legacy. So Lithuanian Hall at that time, in addition to the library, it had a Lithuanian language radio hour. It had classes in Lithuanian. It had classes in Lithuanian culture, very much wanting to preserve the Lithuanian culture. It was at that era that the bar was put in and a bowling alley in the basement. These folks were definitely not going back to Lithuania. They were here to stay. And that did really well and sort of brought a new wave in energy to the Hollins Roundhouse area and the Lithuanian community. The third wave was in the 1990s. Lithuania had gained independence from Russia at that time, and there was another wave of immigrants to the United States. And this wave was much more willing or wanting to assimilate and to be part of a larger community, the larger American community. And in Baltimore, that meant the part of the larger Baltimore community. And that's when the events like the Night of 100 Elvises started happening. The hall was turned into a greater community hall that you could rent out for birthdays and weddings. They started a thing called Save Your Soul Dance Party Night on Fridays that they're still doing. I encourage you to check that out, the old R&B and soul music. And I will wrap up with this. Once we're allowed to go back, it is an event hall. I encourage you to check out their events calendar or go to the bar that I fell in love with 20 years ago. The bar, incidentally, is membership only, but membership, you can buy a guest membership for $5. So go there and have one of their many Lithuanian beers or even their specialty liquor that they have ginned up just for them. And also take a look at what they say is the largest collection of Lithuanian beer cans in the world. And with that, I'll say thanks so much and we'll see you soon.